Hey everyone, Josh Cluth here, and I want to tell you how excited I am to introduce you to Scott Sauls. Scott is a pastor in Nashville, Tennessee at Christ Presbyterian Church. He's also a prolific author, church planner, blogger. You can find him on social media, and he served with Tim Keller at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in Manhattan, New York. I asked Scott if we could interview him with regards to a new book he wrote, and he agreed. His new book is called A Gentle Answer: Our Secret Weapon in an Age of Us Against Them, and it comes out on Tuesday, June 2nd. So I hope you enjoy this interview with pastor and author Scott Sauls. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the work that you do. As a pastor, as an author, as a thinker, our church has been influenced by you from afar, and so it just means a lot to us that you take time to be with us. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.
Your new book is called A Gentle Answer. So first question is, why this book and why now?
Why this book? I think the subtitle tells that story. The subtitle is Our Secret Weapon, that's in quotes, in an age of us against them. I think I don't think it's hard to convince anybody that we are in an age of us against them, where uh, polarization continues to grow. People continue to tribalize and form communities around a common enemy. Of course, in the States, this is a pretty heated political year, with elections coming up and a lot of discontent and anxiety and anger around politics, and add the COVID-19 pandemic and people's deferring opinions and outrage about opposing opinions uh, in so many different circles, and you just get kind of the perfect storm. And so I wrote I wrote A Gentle Answer, uh, chiefly to encourage people of faith, especially those who identify as Christians, to consider a different way, as opposed to just entering the fray of the outrage and living angry. Um, to consider what it might look like to move out into the world with the Spirit's fruit of gentleness.
Well, yeah, we certainly see it culturally, whether it's cancel culture or outrage culture or social media shaming. But Scott, we're Christians. We're calm, we're collected folks, we're reasoned, we're soft spoken. Surely Christians don't have to deal with this.
Is that what a Christian is? All those things that you just said?
uh, where do you think Christians are the most susceptible to fall victim to this challenge today?
uh, I mean, turn your TV on, choose a cable news channel, and you're off to the races. I think that this has always been an issue ever since the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve were exposed and they started blame shifting. Eve blamed the serpent, Adam blamed Eve. He also blamed God for giving Eve to him. And we've been off to the races ever since. Jesus described the dynamic in Luke 18:9 succinctly, when he talked about people who trust in themselves that they are righteous and look down on other people with contempt. And so this is something that's not new. It's not a new American phenomenon. It's an ancient human phenomenon that's just manifesting in new and maybe more amplified, pronounced, visible ways because of the ubiquity of social media. And everybody can have a platform now, right? And everybody's voice can be heard now, at least by somebody. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of hurt out there, and we keep adding to it. And
Do you feel like
I'd love to see that stop, or at least slow down.
Do you feel like there's a particular or unique ways that we amplified in our cultural moment that seem to be unique in any regard?
We being Christians?
Evangelical church in the 21st century.
Well, I think that in the church you've got intramural bickering, back and forth about different things. Used to be the worship wars. I don't know if there's really conversations about worship style as much and arguments about that kind of stuff as much anymore. I think now the issues surround race and sexuality and politics, and a lot of the differences fall along generational lines where maybe people, I'm just generalizing here, but people under 40 are going to maybe think more progressively, and people over 40 or maybe even older than that are going to think more conservatively and co-opt their politics accordingly with their faith, and look upon one another suspiciously as a result. And it's interesting, any given city, you can have two Bible believing churches in different zip codes, perhaps, and the vast majority of the people in one of those churches is going to say or think or feel, at least, I don't know how anybody could call himself a Republican and a Christian. And then on the other side of town, another Bible believing church is filled with people that would say, I don't know how anybody could legitimately call themselves a Democrat and a Christian. And there it is. You've got these types of postures that reveal how inconsistent we are, how incomplete our discipleship is. We don't follow the whole Christ into the whole world the whole time. We follow part of Christ. We follow, whatever part of Christ fits our pre-existing ideology, and we kind of jam him into our ideology. At least, at our worst, that's what we do. At our best, we surrender our ideology and everything about us and our culture and everything else and our politics and everything else to him. And when we do that, though, we can become homeless, for instance, politically. I'm regularly called out for being too conservative by my liberal friends and being too liberal by my conservative friends. And I think there are a lot of people that way who are trying to live kind of that third way approach where, we looked at Jesus, who said his kingdom's not of this world. And we're trying as best we can to live according to that kingdom above any other kingdom that we, associate with. And, I think that principle applies in the race conversation. It applies in the sexuality conversation. It applies in a lot of different conversations about which people disagree, how to solve poverty, and all the rest. So,
Many Christians feel, at least, in Kitsap County where I'm at and at our church, can feel like they're losing their Christian values at a rapid pace in the current cultural climate. And it could feel like the phrase "a gentle answer" is like waving a white flag of surrender. What would be your encouragement to them?
Well, a gentle answer really is just an encouragement, to use Eugene Cho's language, not to be a jerk. I think he just wrote a book called "Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk" in the last year, which I think is a hilarious title. But I think he's striking at the same thing, that in an outrage culture where the pull is constantly to enter in to the ring and put on our boxing gloves, is to remember that Christ isn't just a lion, he's also a lamb. That Christ isn't just a prophet, he's also a priest. He's not just a lawgiver, he's also a lover. He's not just full of truth, he's also full of grace. And those two need to be held together in unity and intention. And so a gentle answer is, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's an effort to swing the pendulum back to balance. Um, because look, how many people are going to be persuaded of what you're trying to tell them in the name of truth if you're scolding them with the truth, if you're judging them, if you're standing above them, if you're righteously indignant all the time, such that nobody feels like you like them, such that nobody feels like you're approachable, such that nobody would confide in you because they don't want to get bit. Um, and I think that everybody in climates like the one we're in right now are susceptible to that. But if we could swing the pendulum so we can simultaneously flex the muscles of conviction, nobody's saying get rid of your conviction, and the muscle of compassion at the same time, um, that's when you get something that's Christ-like, and when you get something that's Christ-like, that's when you get something that's actually good for the world and honoring to Him. Imbalance over here, all grace, no truth, all lamb, no lion, is it's codependent, it's cowardly, it's wimpy. It's not gentle, but it's wimpy. Those are two different things. Gentle and wimpy are very different things. And over here, if it's just all truth, no grace, all law, no love, all ferocity, no kindness, then you're a bully. You're unapproachable. And so the book, I mean, maybe if I just kind of went through the table of contents, it might answer your question, better. The first three chapters are about how Jesus moves toward us in gentleness by befriending the sinner in us, reforming the Pharisee in us, and disarming the cynic in us. But then the last 5 chapters, or part 2, are about how his gentleness changes us. And I suspect that every chapter title will be unexpected by people, to be found in a book about gentleness. And those titles are: We Grow Thicker Skin, We Do Anger Well, We Receive Criticism Graciously, We Forgive All the Way, and We Bless Our Own Betrayers. And so gentleness is a really gutsy thing. It's not a wimpy thing. It takes great strength. It's not a weak person's thing. Gentleness is for those who are strong in the Lord, and it's gutsy, and it's costly, and it's a fruit of the Spirit. So,
without giving away your book, or maybe you'd be willing, can you give us any hint on what the secret weapon is?
although gentleness is the secret weapon, and what that weapon seeks to demolish is outrage, unhealthy anger, life-sucking, life-taking anger, which you could call rage, as opposed to life-giving forms of anger. The Bible itself says, be angry and do not sin. Like the original language, both in the Hebrew in the Psalm that says it, and in the Greek in Ephesians that says it, is in the imperative. It's a command to be angry, to get angry, but do not sin in your anger. Romans talks about how we are to hate what is evil and cling to what is good. And clinging to what is good, what is lovely, what is excellent and praiseworthy and beautiful and true and right and just. Part of clinging to what is good is having a posture of anger and even hatred toward things that do violence against whatever is good and lovely and excellent and praiseworthy, whatever promotes God's peace, shalom, flourishing. So hate things like racism, hate things like bullying, hate things like injustice toward the poor and diminishing the poor, hate things like doing violence toward the unborn out of convenience, or out of some other illegitimate reason. Um, I mean, like, there's no legitimate reason to do violence to a fellow human being. And so hate violence. Don't hate the people doing violence, hate the violence, attack the violence while trying to persuade the people. And it's sometimes it's hard to separate the person and the problem. But that's how world changers and true persuaders um, operate. They seek to attack the problem, not the person, and win the person while soundly defeating the problem in the process. So it's easier said than done, but
one of the things I love about your writing is you use just wonderful examples of folks that demonstrate this at critical moments. So you kind of hit on this already. So maybe you'd say the same thing. But in the last month, we've been brought back around face to face with issues related to racism, lives being lost on camera and then shared, cultural narratives being reinforced, accusations, defensiveness, all of that. How might you hope that a book like this might influence us to move forward together as the church?
I mean, I cover a lot of those concerns in the book, and I mean, I'm with you on that, Josh. Talk about anger. I'm more angry now than I've ever been at the way that some people of color are treated by people with more power, and where life is so devalued and diminished that it seems worth taking life to some people just out in broad daylight. It's just unconscionable to me, and so that's something to attack. That's something to go on the offense with. And I forgot your question. What was your question, Josh?
Since people are lining up on both sides of these issues, not against life or for life, but
Yeah.
you bring up the issue and you suddenly see people divide and almost have these entrenched positions of perceived white guilt, maybe, or that doesn't happen in the Pacific Northwest. And sort of you get people that hear this issue put on national television and people commenting on it and accusations and defensiveness. And how might a book like this help to bring together people that that both love Jesus, but maybe it's generational or maybe it's experiential, but they just don't see the situation the same.
Yeah, well, I think probably this book in particular, it has a lot of anecdotes that can serve as good conversation points. For example, and I'll just give a title to it without telling the story, just to tease your listeners a little bit. The reconciliation between Jerry Falwell and Larry Flint. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but it's a real story where Larry Flint, the famous pornographer and founder of Hustler magazine, and Jerry Falwell, the founder of the moral majority religious right movement of the 80s and 90s, became friends. So there's a story in there. There's a story about John Perkins, the civil rights hero and leader and activist, and how a gentle answer has played itself out over the years through his life. I talk about how an Amish community responded when their children were murdered in a small schoolhouse by a shooter who came in from the outside with an automatic weapon and shot all their children dead, and how the Amish community responded to that. So there's several anecdotes and stories that, and also chapter questions at the end that can engage conversation. But this book, unlike unlike my first book, Jesus Outside the Lines, which I think is probably more the book that addresses the question of what does this look like in this scenario, in this scenario, in this scenario, in this scenario. This book, A Gentle Answer, is more about getting our hearts in a place where we have a fighting chance of actually living that way, rather than continuing to, either put on our gloves or retreat out of being scared to engage. And so this is, I guess, this is a lot about the heart, and there's some practicality in it. Whereas Jesus Outside the Lines is a lot about the practicality, and there's an undercurrent of gospel and the heart stuff. And so they're really good companions together. I didn't intend for it to be that way. I wrote them both independently of each other, but when I finished this one, I'm like, I even put it in the introduction, that I think this actually could be a good prequel to Jesus Outside the Lines, a good book to read and digest before the book I wrote 5 years ago. So kind of did things backwards there, I guess. But
Hey, that's wonderful. Hey, final question for you,
mm-hmm.
Scott. Since you're a pastor to pastors, and many people have benefited from you, and I know folks in our church have read your books as well. Would you have any words of encouragement for the folks here as we try to make sense of what it means to be the church during a time of this prolonged quarantine? Curious if you would have any encouraging words as we continue to wait out these different phases given to us.
Yeah, I would. Stick with your church during this time. Don't disengage. Don't say, "Oh, I'm not really into doing church on TV. I'll just wait till we get back together." Don't do that. Whatever your church is doing, be all in with it, because that's your community. And don't pick a celebrity, preacher from 5 states away to watch on Sunday morning. Listen to your local pastor, and be as loyal to them as they are to you. Be as for them as they are for you, because you're a community and you're a family, and you're called to be that way. And this is the medium. It's an unfortunate medium right now, but at least we have a medium to be able to see each other's faces, to hear each other's voices, and so fight hard to stay in community with those that you're in community with. Don't start dating around, and don't start piecing out. During this time of all times, really, really lean in, maybe even more than you ever have, because that's what the church is. The church doesn't stop being the church when the church is scattered in the way that we've been. And the book of Acts even just gives us a whole picture of that. So that's what I would say to your church people. And nobody's paying me to say this. Nobody asked me to say this. Nobody told me it needed to be said. I'm just saying it. I think church people, you got to stick with your church.
The book is called A Gentle Answer, Our Secret Weapon in an Age of Us Against Them. It comes out Tuesday, June 2nd. Is that right?
Tuesday, June 2nd. That's right.
And we certainly encourage you, Peninsula Bible Fellowship, to buy the book, to read the book. It's a very timely book for the time that we're in. Thank you, Scott.
Sure. I'll say this too, Josh. The pre-order on Amazon is really cheap right now. I don't know why, but I'm glad they dropped somewhere between 30 and 40%. They dropped, the price. So it's like almost at the digital price. So I don't know if that'll stick or not, the pre-order, but
that's
you can
wonderful.
get it cheap. Get it while you can get it cheap.